Good morning, everybody. My name is R.N. Kimball Sanet. I'm a reporter with the Arizona Capital Times, and in the most recent of our series of Zoom Q&As with local newsmakers, and in this case, news writers around the state, we have sat down with David Morgan, who is the editor and publisher of the Cochise County Record down in southern Arizona, I think perennial agitator of government officials down there, and a raconteur of sorts, at least so I hope. We're going to talk to him a little bit about kind of the news environment down there in Cochise County and some of the work that he's doing, especially as it relates to government transparency and information control. David, thanks for talking with me this morning.
Good morning, Aaron.
Morning. Just to kind of start out so people have a sense of kind of who you are and how you got to your current position in life. Can you just sort of give a brief summation of your background and are you from Cochise County? Did you just sort of wander into town? What's your story?
It's hard to do a brief rendition when you're 71 years old. I was born in Des Moines, Iowa, and in those days, Des Moines had one of the finest newspapers in the United States. Your masthead, I recall, when I was a teenager, said something to the effect of more Pulitzer Prizes than anyone except the New York Times. Of course, when you grow up in a city and you read the newspaper, well, you don't think, gosh, how lucky am I to be growing up in a community with a great newspaper. You don't think about it. It is a part of your life. And then I floated around a number of places and owned a number of businesses, some in and out of the news publishing business and the book business and other. And then I was in the Caribbean for 13 years where I developed a severe drinking habit. And when I came back to the States, I was looking around for something to do, and newly sober, found myself trying to read the newspaper in Sierra Vista, Arizona, and shaking my head saying, my Lord, what has this come to, It was so bad. And so I tried to start a little print version, actually literally a single sheet of paper folded in half that I would deliver to the coffee shops every morning with lists of interesting, I thought, useful information about births and deaths and divorces and marriages and arrests and mugshots and all the daily stuff of any community. And everywhere I went, I was told I couldn't get that information. This was in 2005. And I was astonished that you couldn't get access to what we used to call police blotters. It turns out that in Arizona, birth records and death records are in fact not public records. Doesn't mean you can't get access to the information, but you can't just go to the government agency and get it. But I was astonished at things like how difficult it was to get information about court records. In those days, the court system in Cochise County, the Superior Court system, had one single computer terminal for access to court records. It was hidden behind a locked door. It worked about 2/3 of the time. And it wasn't in the major city, Sierra Vista. It was in Bisbee. So it was more than an hour round trip to get to the, and of course only available 5 days a week during business hours. And that was it. One single computer access terminal for information to the what was going on in the courts. Anyway, so my original business plan failed. Because I couldn't get my hands on the basic information that I was planning to publish. So I like any good entrepreneur, I got annoyed and tried to figure out how to do it anyway. And so I started using the internet and email and building my email list. And then along came Facebook a decade later, maybe a little less than that. But anyway, it became a major phenomena for local communications. And so I've used Facebook to develop communications with people in the community. And I now have more readers of what I call serious local news, basically courts and crime, local politics. I have more readers than anybody in the county. That is more than the local newspaper by a significant margin. And yet I might still only reach 12 or 15% of the voters in the county. We have,
And this is all via email, newsletters, and news blasts, or is there a persistent digital presence as well? Like how are you delivering this information exactly?
by Facebook and email,
Hmm.
Twitter to a lesser extent. I had a website for a while, but the time and trouble to maintain it compared to the amazingly simple methods of publishing things on Facebook,
Sure.
it, I abandoned the website itself a couple years ago.
Mm.
I do publish thousands of documents, tens of thousands of pages of court documents and police reports and other things in Document Cloud, and then I link to those so that when people read a news story that I send them by email or on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, they can actually read the court documents or the police reports or whatever it is we're referring to in the story.
Hmm. It's funny. That seems like it's almost more of an intuitive interaction with readers than a lot of more established newspapers have. I mean, one that's more direct and sort of communal. I guess that's sort of part of the phenomenon of being in a relatively small place in terms of population as well.
Well, yeah, you have to remember we have no local television stations,
Mm-hmm.
no radio stations that carry local news, no cable TV access channels.
Hmm.
We're in a largely rural environment. So yeah, it's when people in the news industry talk about news deserts, we're literally in one. This is the high Sonoran Desert here, and we're in a news desert too. And I would guess that no more than 20% of all of the adult residents of Cochise County, that is about 100,000 people, no more than 20% get any local news whatsoever.
Hmm. And when you got to the area, or just based on your historical knowledge, was there a more robust media environment, before everything sort of collapsed, with the digital era in the past?
Well, certainly the WIC Communications owned newspapers, Sierra Vista Herald, Bisbee Review, San Pedro Valley, I can't remember, the Benson newspaper, Wilcox newspaper, Douglas newspaper, all owned by the same corporation, family-based corporation in Sierra Vista. Certainly they had better times until the crash of the real estate industry in 2008. I mean, don't understand, they weren't a very serious local news operation. And they didn't have very good circulation, but they were far better then than they are now. And now, candidly, they're down to begging for money. I mean, it's embarrassing in my way of thinking.
Yeah. And I'm curious, before we kind of get to the news of the day, so to speak, how did you develop your instinct for these things, for navigating government channels, for fighting for records? I mean, it doesn't sound like you had a formal training. Well, how did you sort of cut your teeth and develop these?
Well, as a young businessman, I was always in trouble. And I think one year when I was less than 30 years old, I got sued about 40 times. And it was always over money, of course, contract disputes, whatnot. Usually I just couldn't pay my bills on time. So basically I had to learn how courts worked in general. And then I was lucky and married a woman who had a whole bunch of friends who were lawyers. And so I would talk with them a lot and learn a lot from them. And I grew to respect and understand the court system and the legal profession as it's supposed to work. And I'd always been fascinated with the news business. I did, in fact, own a tiny newspaper in Albuquerque, New Mexico in the early 70s. And I published a shopper with a huge huge circulation, 80,000 a week. So I was familiar with the business side of things, selling advertising, developing reader interest, all those kinds of things. The public records aspect, frankly, I got annoyed. I couldn't understand how. I mean, I could actually show officials and clerks the law, the Arizona Public Records Law. which isn't complicated to read or understand. I'd show it to them and they'd say, oh yeah, I see. They'd call a supervisor over and they'd look at it too and they'd say, oh yeah, but we don't do it that way here. With a straight face, they just say, we don't follow the law here. And so I've had 6 or 8 legal battles locally, and won all but the first one, and that's of course because I didn't know what I was doing on the first one. And
have you been your own have you been your own counsel in all of these?
Yes, you can't. Wow. It's hard to find. Again, we are where we are, and it's hard to find local counsel who's competent in Arizona public records law, and also is willing and interested to challenge local authority that they have to deal with day in and day out. Maybe they grew up with them. Mm-hmm. And then finally, of course, there's a question of money. And I didn't have any money to hire attorneys. And even though Arizona public records law now does allow for attorneys' fees, when I started this, it didn't, or it wasn't clear that attorneys could get paid that way. So again, now I've developed relationships with attorneys in Tucson and Phoenix, and ICE of the First Amendment Law Clinic from ASU in Phoenix. They're not actually representing me in this federal action, but I am getting the benefit of research and advice from that clinic.
I see. And on that subject, I do want to get into this most recent court challenge that you've become embroiled in. I think I have a copy of a brief here that you sent me in which I assume it's you who wrote in describing the political environment in Cochise County that cronyism, nepotism, malfeasance, misfeasance, open meeting law violations, run-of-the-mill errors, and silliness by local government employees are subjects and evidence that, quote, everybody, I assume in the county, knows about, but not really. Few people know the details, and almost none have seen the documentation. I thought that was fascinating and well written as well. If you could just sort of give us a little bit of an insight into what exactly these behaviors are that you're describing and kind of what the context is of this most recent legal battle that you've set yourself up in.
Well, again, we're in communities that, because there's never been, I mean, literally never in the history of the county in 100 years, there's never been a serious local news operation. In the 20s, the mining companies, who were huge political forces as well as economic forces in this county and all of Arizona for that matter, but they bought up every newspaper in southern Arizona, including the Arizona Daily Star, so that they could control what was published in those local communities, in what is now my local community. And so the citizens, the great-grandparents, grandparents, parents of the people I'm dealing with today, are unaccustomed to a newspaper who challenges the important people. You know, the judges, the sheriff, the county attorney, it's just unheard of. I mean, we've actually had, I've had a couple of volunteer or poorly paid reporters working with me, and we've actually had public officials say to us, I'm not accustomed to having people challenging me like this. Well, and they're right, they're not, you know, and neither was their father and their grandfather, because it's never happened before. So it's not just fighting against a particular judge or a particular public official, you know, elected official. It's the entire community's history is that they're uncomfortable with all of these things being public, even though that's the law. I mean, we have people who do not understand, lots of people who do not understand that courts are open, that they can go in and observe a court a hearing that has nothing to do with them whatsoever. They don't have to explain to a guard why they're there. They can just go in and watch, and they can't hardly imagine that. It seems wrong to them because they've never observed it before. So anyway, so the battle. I mean, yeah, every community has problems. I mean, large and small has problems with corruption. I use the much broader sense of the word, that is like a corrupt computer file. It doesn't function in the manner in which it was designed to function. It doesn't accomplish what it was supposed to do. So the criminal justice system is corrupt if it's not accomplishing justice, right? Because that's what it's designed to do. So it's not necessarily, matter of fact, it's probably very few cases where people are taking money in order to hide something. Right? But it's lots more subtle stuff. You know, Susie, the clerk in the courthouse, realizes that this paperwork she just stamped for somebody is about a friend of hers, and there's details about her divorce or her child custody battle in it. And so she figures that her friend wouldn't really want all that stuff to be public. So she figures out a way to do the data entry so that it's hard to find that file. Right? Now, on the one hand, it seems almost innocent, trying to make sure that her friend doesn't get embarrassed. But the clerk, that deputy clerk, just interfered with access to public documents. And technically, that's probably a felony because Arizona Public Records Law calls for anything that's done that impedes access to a public record. Well, and it was purposeful. It wasn't accidental. I mean, you could argue that she had good motives, but you know. And these kinds of things multiplied by thousands in police departments and school boards and the county recorder's office and the treasurer, not the treasurer, the county assessor's office. It's like anything where you're attempting to keep things hidden, that's what I'm fighting against.
Wow. Great. Well, we are just at the 15 or so minute mark. I think people are going to begin losing attention soon. No,
I understand that.
But I greatly appreciate your time, David. It's been a blast, really interesting stuff. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.
Great. Thanks very much, Aaron. Good luck to you.
Thanks. You too.